Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" In the name of the living God, amen. Let's be seated. There is something I've realized that I do all the time. I do it so often, in fact, that it has almost become a reflex. And it's this. It's called pranam. And it's how my parents say goodbye to each other and to me. One of the great blessings of my life is that my parents are of different faiths and that each has always shown deep love and respect for the tradition of the other. What they have modeled for me is a freedom from the tyranny of having to believe that the other is wrong in order to be in order for something to be right for them. That has given them the freedom each to dive deeply into their own faith, knowing that their different paths don't prevent them from being companions on the journey. It is a freedom that lets them be changed by each other because they are not threatened by each other. Now, the sacrament of this, the outward and visible sign of this grace between them, is pranam. My dad is Anglican. He was born and raised in England. My mom grew up in the Episcopal Church, and then about 40 years ago, she joined Self-Realization Fellowship, which promotes the practice of meditation and yoga to bring people closer to God and the divinity in all people. It is so clear that each is on the path that is right for them. Now, for me, from about 3rd through 8th grade, before I chose following Jesus as my path, I was active in both churches. I went to an Episcopal school, and I acolyted at church. And I practiced meditation and read the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and went to summer camp at the SRF Lake Shrine in Pacific Palisades. And it was at that camp that I first learned pranam as a way of greeting and parting from another. But it is in the lives of my parents that it has become a part of me. Now, the motion of pranam is deeply intentional. Facing one another, the joining of hands symbolizes the meeting of two souls. You then bow in humility, palms pressed together over the heart, then touching the fingertips to the forehead. You might be familiar with the Sanskrit word namaste, which literally means I bow to you, and has the deeper meaning of the divine in me bows to the divine in you. Well, pranam actually goes even deeper than that. It is an opening of the body, mind, and spirit that invites the divinity in you to become a part of me, and the divinity in me to become a part of you. It's not just an acknowledgement, but it is an expansion of the soul to embrace and be changed by the other. Pranam is a revolutionary act. And I believe it is how people as different as my parents have been able to stay married for more than half a century. Because they are not only able to see the divine in each other, but strive to have the best of the other become a part of them. See, it's a simple motion. It takes but a few seconds. And I know that I have been doing it for so long that it has become reflexive in that habitual way that diminishes both its power and complexity. For example, at times I do it quickly as an expression of honoring, and yet it's so much more than that. And I've realized as I've thought about it that there are times where I use it as a defense. I can be so uncomfortable with the idea of someone seeing the divine in me that I kind of use it as a shield so that before that recognition, that desire to encounter can reach me, I redirect it back toward the other in an act that looks like humility, but is actually an unhealthy, unholy denial of the divine in myself. The truth is, while pranam is a simple motion, as a way of being, it is often profoundly challenging. For us to be willing to be touched and changed by the divine in the other, we have to set aside the labels that we use to limit and dismiss one another. We each have to acknowledge not only that the divine exists in people whom we find challenging, offensive, dangerous, or at the very least deeply annoying, it means that we have to acknowledge the divine exists in ourselves. And sometimes that's the more difficult task. And it doesn't stop there. Pranam is an act of deep vulnerability. For those who have experienced abuse in touch and relationship, for those who are experiencing oppression, it can be threatening and even dangerous. So for pranam to be mutual, those with power must be willing either to use that power to create a space of safety or set aside that power so that the other knows it will not be used against them. It means that when one person faces another with a desire to use their power to wound them, while the vulnerable person may offer pranam as an act of deep, extraordinary love, they should never be forced into it. In situations of abuse, the true and necessary act of pranam is for someone who is not vulnerable to stand between the abuser and the victim so that the injury and abuse is not allowed to continue. Pranam is a simple motion. It just takes a few seconds. And pranam is a complex notion. It takes a lifetime to learn. But when I do it with intention, it expresses the deepest truth that I know. That every time I am face to face with another person, there is an opportunity for each of us to meet and be changed by the presence of God in the other. Now, this morning, after journeying together through the entire liturgical year, we end our telling of the Jesus story with two people standing face to face, Jesus and Pilate. Pilate is the governor, Jesus the prisoner. And so to any onlooker, Pilate has all the power. And yet it's Pilate who is afraid. Pilate is afraid that Jesus poses a threat to his power, and in his fear, Pilate cannot see who Jesus really is. In his fear, all Pilate can try to do is label Jesus in a way that will let him control him. But not only does Jesus fail to be labeled and controlled, not only does Jesus refuse to play Pilate's game, he also refuses to do the same to Pilate. And instead, he invites Pilate into a deeper kind of relationship. Jesus says to Pilate, "You say I am a king, but I am not going to take that label. I was born and came into the world for only one purpose, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who seeks the truth hears my voice." And Pilate's reply echoes throughout the millennia. What is truth? What is truth? We journey through the entire story of the gospel, and it ends this day with a question, and not just a question, but the question: what is truth? And the greatest irony is that the answer is not only standing right in front of Pilate, the answer is in the word itself. The Greek word translated as truth is aletheia. It is not truth as proposition, but truth as revealed in relationship. It can better be translated as the state of not being hidden or concealed. 20th century philosopher Martin Heidegger described aletheia as the opening of presence. Pilate asks, what is truth? And yet truth is standing right in front of him. Truth as the opening of presence. Truth as unconcealed relationship with a God who desires nothing more than to be fully present with us. Truth as the expansion of the truthful soul, each encountering and being loved and changed by the divine in the other. Truth is standing right in front of Pilate, and yet Pilate can't grasp it. Or maybe Pilate does understand it all too well and just knows that it's too difficult. Because if Pilate were not only to acknowledge and be changed by the divine that was in Jesus, but to allow Jesus to touch and awaken the divine that was in him, he could not help but be toppled from his oppressor's throne, for he could no longer bear to play that role. Truth is standing right in front of Pilate. Truth that is the opening of presence. Jesus stood in front of Pilate, pressed his palms together, held them to his heart, then bowed and touched his forehead. And Pilate took his hands and turned away and washed them clean. What about us? Are we willing to be changed by who is right in front of us? Do we label and dismiss, or do we give ourselves the chance to truly encounter? Will we stand together in the places of greatest vulnerability, risk, and pain? Do we greet each other with pranam? What is truth? Truth is pranam. It is the quest to have the divine in each of us reveal, encounter, and become one with the divine in the other. It is not the violence of abuse and subjugation, nor is it the violence of the quest to convert or somehow save the other. It is not proposition or dogma or a set of rules that must be followed, but the expansion of the soul to embrace and be changed by the other. It is the freedom to dive deeply into the richness of our own faith tradition, knowing that different paths do not prevent us from being companions on the journey. It is a freedom that lets us be changed by each other because we are not threatened by each other. It is the difference between striving for justice as a way of doing good for others and striving for justice because what once was the other has become a part of you, a part of me, a part of us. When we stand face to face and pranam, I cannot oppress you without knowing that I am oppressing myself. When we stand face to face and pranam, I can bear no injustice against you because there is no distinction between your pain and mine. When this is our truth, there is no homelessness because we would never let God sleep on the sidewalk. No mothers would wail over their dead children in the street because we would never allow a world where our children were gunned down with impunity. No one would ever be separated from their child at the border because all would be welcomed not only here, but everywhere. When we stand face to face and pranam, there is no racism, sexism, or ageism, no xenophobia, homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia, no fear or hatred of any other of any kind, because we are too enthralled with the joy of encountering and being changed by the many names, faces, and stories of the divine. What is truth? Pilate asks. Truth is standing right in front of him. Truth is Christ. Truth is pranam. Truth that meets us at our most abused and broken, but refuses to let us stay there, hearing our own tales of suffering and victimhood and holding us in them and then loving them into tales of triumph and flourishing. Truth that takes everything that the world tells us is ugly and unlovable about who we really are and says, no, do not listen to those lies. You are made in God's image. You are beloved and beautiful and powerful and good, and then bids us to see and love each other the same way. It is the truth of Christ. And so it bids us to stand like Jesus in front of the throne and with our very lives on the line, demand that our leaders bow not to the wealthy and the powerful, but to the most vulnerable and the oppressed, and say those words the devotee in the Bhagavad Gita says to the divine, my activity, my love, and my mind are at your service. Truth is standing right in front of Pilate. Truth that is the opening of presents. Jesus stood in front of Pilate, pressed his palms together, held them to his heart, then bowed and touched his forehead. And Pilate took his hands and turned away and washed them clean. What about us? Are we willing to be changed by who is right in front of us? Will we label and dismiss, or will we give ourselves the chance truly to encounter one another? Will we stand together in the places of greatest vulnerability, risk, and pain? Will we be free to be awakened, to be inspired, to be transformed by each other because we refuse to be threatened by each other? Will we greet each other with pranam?